A very good morning to all the audience and the esteemed experts on the virtual dais. It has indeed been a great pleasure as to the number of people who are joining us for the last three webinars of the National Webinar Series on SLD through Facebook and YouTube. I am Professor Renu Malavia, Secretary, IWAFA, and Professor at the Department of Education, Lady Irwin College, University of Delhi. Light is a universal symbol of truth, knowledge, and understanding. A lighted lamp is considered an auspicious symbol. Let us start this webinar with our traditional auspicious lamp lighting ceremony as a tribute to divinity.
गजाननं भूतगणाधिसेवितं गजाननं भूतगणाधिसेवितं कवित्तजम्बो बलसारभक्षितम् उमासुतं शोकविनाशकारणम् नमामि विघ्नेश्वर पादपङ्कजम् नमामि विघ्नेश्वर पादपङ्कजम्
We have with us Asha Chandra, our president of IWAFA, All India Women's Education Fund Association. I request her to give the welcome address and enable us to know more about IWAFA. I take this opportunity to say a few words about Asha Chandra before I hand over the virtual platform to her. An advertising professional, Asha Chandra's expertise spans multimedia platforms. Having worked with the world's leading advertising agencies, J. Walter Thompson and Ogilvy and Mather, and as a short film maker and writer, she brings a target-oriented, all-encompassing approach to the social sector. The president of the 92-year-old, almost 93 now, All India Women's Education Fund Association, IWAFA. MS Chandra has been the governing body chairperson of Lady Irwin College. Lady Irwin College was founded by IWAFA in 1932. Asha Chandra steered IWAFA during the COVID pandemic, when physical interaction had come to a standstill, to activities that could do using technology and the online mode. It is through this foresight of Asha Chandra that IWAFA has been able to remain not only connected, but has been able to increase its activities for women empowerment, community development, and education across the country and increased its presence globally. Dr. Asha Chandra.
Thank you so much, Professor Malvia, for the kind words. In fact, I can't recognize myself. Dear friends, a very warm welcome to all our participants and the eminent panel who have joined us today for the National Webinar Series, Specific Learning Disabilities, SLD, Dyslexia. Before we commence our discussions for today, just a few words about our organization. 93 years ago, as Professor Malvia mentioned, the doyens of the freedom movement, Sarojini Naidu, Rajkumari Amrit Kaur, Aruna Asaf Ali, to name just a few. They recognized that the only route to women's advancement was education. And for this purpose, the All India Women's Education Fund Association was set up in 1929. Under the first three presidents of IWFA, the vicereines, Lady Dorothy Irwin, after whom the college is named, Lady Marie Willingdon, and Lady Doreen Linlithgow, the organization founded Asia's first home science college, the Lady Irwin College, in 1932. And Mahatma Gandhi conferred the college slogan, Shiksha Hi Seva. IWFA has undertaken programs and projects that promote literacy, legal awareness, lifelong skills, vocational training, decent work and sustainable growth, mindful lifestyles, and climate change mitigation. From the local to the global, all of IWFA's initiatives integrate women's rights as human rights and promote gender equality and inclusivity, encompassing all the vulnerable sections like people with disabilities, senior citizens, and others. In 1999, the organization was conferred with the special consultative status with the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations, the ECOSOC status. In 2003, the organization accepted the role of regional coordinator for the United Nations non-government organization, NGO, informal regional network of NGOs. And in 2017, the observer status was accorded with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC. These recognitions have provided the organization with an opportunity to integrate national and international concerns through consultation, cooperation, and coalition in the larger international arena of the United Nations. The impact of the COVID-19, combined with the accelerated rate of climate change adversities, have forced the world into a stop and reset mode. The experiences gained from grassroots projects have guided this organization's pandemic response and recovery. The programs ensure gender equality while safeguarding the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The national webinar series, Dyslexia, SLD, is in line with our work for the Nina Sibyl Memorial Award. Instituted in 2003 to recognize organizations working with disabilities, the award acknowledges their contribution in the area of disabilities with a grant of rupees 8 lakhs along with a citation and trophy. Held annually for the last 20 years, we are hoping that the award presentation, which has been held online for the last 2 years, will take place in its physical form at the India Habitat Center on 2nd August from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. The form for application will soon be shared on our website, social media, and through mails, and we look forward to your applying or disseminating it further so that organizations apply for the award. It is now my proud privilege to welcome our eminent panelists for today, Dr. Geet Oberoi and Dr. Lalita Ramanujan. Over to you, Renu.
Thank you, Asha Chandra. One feels so proud to be associated with All India Women's Education Fund Association, IWAFA, and its remarkable legacy and outstanding current position. IWAFA believes in starting to work in areas even before the need is contextualized by others at large. It is indeed our honor that the national webinar series on specific learning disabilities, dyslexia, being organized by IWAFA, All India Women's Education Fund Association, has been able to invite the most eminent experts from the field, pan India and also abroad. We are also so fortunate that a large number of audience wanting to listen to these experts have joined us through YouTube and Facebook. Specific learning disabilities, SLD, in India is the umbrella term for special needs such as dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, developmental aphasia. In India, we were a little late in introducing specific learning disabilities, SLD, in our acts and policies for disabilities. It was accepted only in the recent Rights for Persons with Disability Act 2016 as a disability and hence one which has special needs. NEP 2020, National Education Policy 2020, endorses whatever has been stated and recommended by the RPWD Act 2016. In the absence of defined national acts and policies for SLD, not only the implementation of awareness creation, pedagogical and stakeholder support facilitation, research, and advocacy for the children with specific learning disabilities, but foremost, the process of holistic constructive assessment and diagnosis, which is Indian psychosocial cultural specific, had difficulty in its development. Specific learning disability being a neurodevelopmental disability, or can we say a neurodiversity, is considered an invisible condition. These children are average and above average in intelligence. However, just how the individual with SLT takes in information from the environment and how the brain of this individual with SLD processes that input of information and how that is expressed by the individual while interacting with the environment in the larger global world is difficult for a layperson or even a professional from another field to completely comprehend. In the case of sensory disabilities such as blindness, hearing impairment, locomotor disabilities, and others, it is easier to assess and certify how much disability there is. However, in the case of neurodevelopmental disabilities such as SLD, how does one enter the brain and assess and certify the level of disability? Let alone going into the issue of is it a disability or a diversity? To add to this, research indicates that there are 10% to 15% of children in mainstream schools who would have the condition of SLD, and many of them have not even been, they're unidentified. The assessment hasn't been appropriately, nobody has reached the assessment stage for them. Remember that these children are average or above average in intelligence. Oh, I'm just going to leave it to the eminent experts on the virtual dais to demystify the entire process of assessment and challenges and issues faced and the difficult hills that had to be climbed in the area of assessment to reach where the country is today for our children with SLD. So tighten your seatbelts as we hear the experts take us through webinar 4, the assessment tools towards constructive diagnosis. But before that, let me introduce them. It is my proud privilege to introduce Lalita Ramanujan. Lalita Ramanujan is the founder and director of the Alpha to Omega Learning Center, Chennai. She has been working in the field of specific learning disabilities for more than 32 years now. with an MPhil in psychology and a BS in education for LD, University of Minnesota, and a diploma in dyslexia therapy from Hornsby International Center, London. Lalita Ramanujan conducts training programs for tutors apart from working with children. She's a certified trainer for the Strategic Intervention Model, Kansas University, National Institute of Learning Development, USA, a professionally certified educational therapist, IDA certified dyslexia therapist, and the Ferenstein Instrumental Enrichment Program Israel is another hat under that she wears. She has won numerous awards for her contribution in the dissemination of strategies to deal with SLD in India. Some of the organizations which have honored are the Rotary Club, the Eltrusa Club, the Baha'i Foundation, FICCI Ladies Organization, Women's Christian College Education World. She has conducted numerous training programs in remediation methodologies across the country and abroad and presented at conferences, India and international. Welcome, Lalita Ramananjan. I also have the proud privilege to introduce Dr. Geet O'Brien. Geet O'Brien has a doctoral in efficacy of remedial intervention in learning disabilities. Her main area of work includes assessment and remediation to children with special needs and professional development courses, primarily for instructors. In the recent years, she has delved in research to enhance the concept of inclusion in the Indian education system. She is an active member of numerous national committees and forums under NCERT, CIET, and RCI, enhancing inclusive education. She was awarded the Guruvar Award for Outstanding Indian Teacher of Children with Special Needs and Women Achievers Award, and has also been a TEDx talk speaker on simplistic complexity. In her most recent endeavors, she has initiated a collaborative research program with Professor Kathleen Snow from Harvard Graduate School of Education. She was also a visiting scholar there. Her recent longitudinal research in Hindi English biliteracy acquisition at addressing the issue of how cognitive processes of phonology and orthology contribute differentially to native language and second language. She has also developed First Screen, a screening app for specific learning disabilities. She is the founder of ORCIDS, which is a pioneering organization in India working in the field of learning disabilities and inclusive education since 2000. ORCID has gained presence across the country and its neighboring countries like Bangladesh and UAE. Welcome, Dr. Geet O'Brien. As a discussant, I have been given such a privileged position. I can ask as many questions as I wish. So let me take advantage of this opportunity. May I have the same first question to Dr. Geet O'Brien? What is the difference between screening, assessment, diagnosis, intervention? It's so very mind-boggling. Can you please enlighten us about the variations here?
Namaskar, everybody. So, without wasting any more time, I'm just going to go into the answer. So, basically, when we talk about a cycle, a remediation cycle or an intervention cycle, it has certain steps, and these steps are supposed to be done in order. You cannot go in any random order. The first step which comes in SLD management is screening to see whether the kids have or may have what is called SLD or any related issues. Then we go on to assessment. The purpose of assessment is again to know what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses of a child with SLD. As we already know that SLD can be different types, no two children with SLD are the same. So their strengths and their weaknesses can be very, very unique to themselves, very, very different. So if one plan works with child A, it's not necessary the same plan will also work with another dyslexic or a dysgraphic child. So the whole idea or the purpose of assessment is to make sure we understand what is the profile of the child, what is the deficit of the child, and what are the strengths we can take leverage of. Going on to diagnosis, the as you know, it's a personal thing. As far as diagnosis is concerned, we try not to, or we should not try to use the purpose of diagnosis for labeling at all. The purpose of diagnosis is to make sure that the child gets the accommodations as per the PWD Act or the policies the government has laid down. All right. And the last and the most important thing is the intervention. Just because we have screened or assessed or diagnosed a child is not going to make the difference. The real difference comes from working with the child to make sure there is an improvement in the skill profile of the child. So this is a cycle. So first is screening, then is assessment, then is diagnosis, and lastly is the intervention. For all these four steps, the people who are able to conduct this are overlapping, and some are specifically for the purpose. For example, special educator will work with the child in terms of intervention. Psychologist will do the diagnosis. The assessment is also done by the psychologist. However, screening can be done even by general ed teachers if they know how to screen or they have tools for screening. Even parents can do the screening, again, if they have the tools for screening. But it has to be done in this order. You cannot start intervention and then say that I want to do screening next. It has to follow a certain pattern. Only then can we do justice to our kids. You're muted, Dr. Malvia.
Here I go. Okay, so it's so much clearer to me now. So you go from one to the other, and there are different people who can do certain things, and the others are trained and qualified to do the other. Oh, wonderful! I thought I could do all of them. Uh, so comes in to the next question from here is we're talking about Lalita Ramanujan. May I request ask you this question, please? uh,
Yes.
there's this importance. What is the why is it so important to screen the gaps in early literacy skills? I mean, this child goes to school at 3 plus, pre-nursery, nursery, whatever, and we do the actual assessment at age 8 or class 3 or whatever. And there's one more question that has been bothering me is in a country like India, where we are teaching English through different Indian languages. So English through Tamil, English through Hindi, English through Marathi, and on. Does that create a problem somewhere too?
Yes. Um, uh, First of all, I say a namaste to everybody who are here. I will share with you whatever I have seen in my work experience. When we say a child, I'll first take the first question. Is it important to screen? As Geet very nicely said, that is the first step. You may see some differences. A parent may see this child did not cry at birth, or a 2 year old, or at that 2.5, not able to do his buttons. Little telltale signs everybody can watch. And when they talk to the doctor, or when they go to the nursery, and the teacher is saying he's not able to do things like other children, not able to color within a square. So these are all telltale signs we can watch. I'd like to share one thing. See, when the COVID hit us, we all did so much to build up our immunity so that we don't get it. So why not start help at the early, when you see the simplest sign, get the help so that it doesn't become a big issue. So I always feel, we cannot say it will become all right. Very often we hear parents say, his father was talking late, so he'll become all right later. No, why? When there is a help, why can't we take it? Why can't we guide the child? So early screening or early identification, I say, is more of a blessing. It's not a curse for labeling. So let us remember that. So screening is very important. We can create awareness among teachers, among parents, to say What are the little signs? Very often when we take the case history, I'm sure Geet will say, will also agree, parents say he did not cry at birth, or he did not crawl. There are little things. So this all builds up. And then when he comes to the nursery and he's doing a lot of things that others are doing, he cannot do rhyming, he cannot pick up the sounds of the letter, he doesn't make association. So why wait till come to class 2 or 3 when the problem is aggravated? So early screening is very important, and you must seek the right professional, not go to someone who will say, wait, this is something that all children will do, he will become all right. It's maybe he will become all right. Why not take the right step, find out, and help the child, so that we don't have it into a bigger thing. Earlier, the better. And uh, making parents and teachers aware, like, asking them to do a screening report. And I feel a teacher with an experience of a few years with the children is the best person to tell us he is different. So don't say the teacher or overrule the teacher. Take their guidance and help. Yeah. Uh,
So, and regarding uh, this, ours is a bilingual country,
yeah.
so often we tend to, intermix the languages.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Yeah, that is very common. We have seen when a child, say, if it is not a very affluent or a well trained teachers are in the school, many of the children, when they come, they can be first generation children who are coming to school, or parents who have limited exposure. See, we all talk our tongue at home. When we come to school, we come to another medium of instruction, that is the English. And many parents, even if the lower social, it's nothing to do with the socio-economic level, everybody wants a child to do English medium. But in the classroom, when the teacher is explaining, she tends to translate, and the whole purpose is lost. I think when I was a kid, I was the first generation learner to go, but my teachers did not translate. We learned it the hard way. We were forced to read. Nobody gave us this example. Like, I'm recently working with a small child, and he did not know what to say. I want to drink water. So he's saying it in Tamil. So when I was telling him this, it takes time, but I don't know that was the thing that happened to us. We three agree with that. When we were small, we didn't get the translation in our classes. Maybe I don't know about the
huh.
government schools, but 90, because I'm from the very older generation compared to others here. So we have to understand that teachers also must be aware. Maybe a little bit of help to say, but how do we learn a second language? How, see, for example, if I come and to another country and where there's a complete different language, I'm meant for sort of put into that completely, and I pick up. So give the chance to the child. Don't make the child dependent on saying, you don't know English, I'll tell you in Tamil, but learn it. The thinking process, the way, the vocabulary, everything must be established. So when we are doing screening, we have to understand, is it a SLD condition because that is something neurological, or is it because of environmental factor, English is not known. So we cannot say a child who's got English learning difficulty as a child with a learning problem. This issue is different. So we as people who are in the field need to differentiate between the two.
Wow. So that means there is a learning difficulty could be because of environmental factors.
Yeah,
The
because he's
learning
not
disab-
exposed.
the learning disability or specific learning disability is something which can be enhanced by the environment, but it is predominantly not because of the environment.
Yes, because it is in the child. It is something that
It's in the
is a
child,
lifelong
and it's a
condition.
condition, and it's not a disease. I suppose.
Yeah,
Right?
it is not a
Okay.
disease.
I, so, but we're talking about the other thing is first was this confusion about screening and assessment and interventions and everything. But even in assessments, there are different types of assessments. And for neurodiversities or neurodevelopmental disabilities, I think there are more types of assessments that one has to do. Could you please tell us more about this?
Yeah. See, when we say assessments, we all think a test is an assessment. Yes. Like, when we do our final exam or a term exam or a monthly test or whatever you can call it, we say it is summative. How did the child learn what was taught? You're evaluating him on that, whatever he has learned. It has nothing to do with his independent skills. There are children who will do very well. They can memorize the answer, write it perfectly, and get 9 out of 10, and they are good. But then there is another kind which some of the schools do, most of the affluent schools or children schools that have the facility will do. It's like, a formative. How was he last week? How is this? We have taught him a new method or a way of understanding this concept. Has he picked it up? Is he better? So that is formative. It goes on and on. It may be difficult for all schools to do that because the large number of children and also the teachers may not be trained in that. Doing a summative, even in the summative in the classrooms, you see, we have the objective type and we have the essay type. Teachers are very easy in setting up an essay answer, but when it is a multiple choice, they need more time to think and more time to prepare. So it is very difficult. So even there is a difference. But when we come to assessment to children who come to us with a learning problem, there are two important things we got to remember. One is the formal and one is the informal. The formal one, as Geet mentioned, it is done by a psychologist, a trained person, must have the license and so many other things. Or there are a lot of psychiatrists who will employ trainee psychologists and they will do and they'll supervise it. So it's a standardized test. There are some few Indian standardized tests, but many of them also use the foreign test, which should be culture free and it should not interfere with the child's understanding of the test. We cannot take a very old test. See, sometimes I get a little worried. I get a report, the child has done a test, the name is given, but then what revision was it? If it is a revision done in 1970, the child was not even born then. So you don't ask questions which is not at all relevant to the child. So let us do something. The standardized test we use must be up to date. And if it is an Indian test, there are a few Indian tests, but it must be most appropriate. You cannot take a 15-year-old and do a reading age test, which is standardized for 12 years. Then we are not going in line or ethically doing the right thing. So choosing the appropriate tool is the first thing in standardized. But as a teacher, she may not have access or know or do not know how to interpret the results given. If it's a detailed result explaining that, so say, let's take one standardized test, known the very common one, the Wechsler's test, which is used internationally, and many of our psychologists also use. The old model talked about the verbal and performance, the two big areas that we looked at, and then they said if it is a difference, it is SLD. But now it has changed over the years. Everything changes. Now the new WIS looks at 5 areas. So it gives us more information. So the psychologist must tell us the each area where the weaknesses, where the child did, or everything very clearly. The teacher must know how to interpret. That is one angle. In an informal test, which the teacher or the special educator can do herself, find out what is the reading age, a non-verbal reasoning test. There is like we have the Raven's progressive matrix, which will tell us about the intelligence level of the child without language, his reasoning ability. It will help us to know, is he got some cognitive deficits that is globally affecting him, or is it just some reasoning of understanding a certain perception and cognition is affecting him? Then is reading and spelling age, which can be developed by the teacher, or there are a lot of informal tests which they can do. But again, I feel I don't like to take a test from the net and use it because mothers prepare the kids and bring them. And then the whole thing becomes invalid. So, equipping the teacher to understand what is informal, what is formal, what she can do, how to read is something that we need really to focus and help. Geet, would you like to add something?
You're muted. Geet, you're muted.
Yeah, yeah. No, I said you covered it all beautifully.
Yeah.
I'm good.
So my question, which was I was trying to thinking of putting to Geet next, was why should assessment be done? Probably it's covered. Would you like to add something to that, Geet? Uh,
Um, uh, Basically, the only I just a caution is what I would like to say here. We all have to remember, whether we are a parent, whether we are teachers or psychologists or counselors in school or coordinators in school. We have to remember that assessment is just the first step. Just getting an assessment done is not going to do wonders. Or it's not going to create any miracle. It is the first step, and the in the whole cycle, right? In the whole actually doing or making a difference in the child's life. So, assessment will only tell us whether the doubt we had vis a vis the child is right or not, right? It will only tell us that these are the deficits we need to work on. This is the interest of the child. Maybe we can use the interest of the child to work with the child, leverage his strengths to work on his weaknesses. That's it. So sometimes I've seen what happens is a lot of parents and teachers will do the assessment and they say, okay, now everything will be fine. Nothing. That's only the the stepping stone. What will make the real difference is the work done with the child, the intervention with the child. So we just need to make sure that our priority is set, and we just move forward, get over with the assessment, and start the real work. So just a little bit of reprioritizing needs to be done here. That's it.
So, assessment is the foundation on which the entire building has to be built. And one more thing which I left out was that Lalita said was I found this very interesting that not everyone can do the assessment. You need to be a licensed professional to be able to do that.
Yes.
So,
So,
what is important? Yes, would you like to
no,
add something there? Yeah.
no. So basically, what Lalita meant here by license, which I think we all know, is basically we have to be registered with the Rehabilitation Council of India, which is called the RCI. And so every country has their own ways and codes of licensing and work as far as recognition and acceptance is concerned. So in India, you have to be an RCI qualified or RCI recognized person. But one more thing, Renuji, I would like to add, going back to my previous answer, you know there are times when the schools insist on assessment even very early, really early, ki we will not give the child any support unless you have the stamp of the disability written. So I think that's another thing we need to take with a pinch of salt. There is no need to push the child into assessment if he's only showing small softer signs, like Lalita had said. It's a possibility that the child will need only a very short intervention plan and will be mainstream. कोई ज़रूरत नहीं है बच्चे पे स्टैम्प लगाने की शुरुआत में. We are playing with the child's life, right? So if a small extra help can make such a big difference, what is the need to push children to go for assessment really early in life? You just start the work with the child. Leave the assessments and diagnosis for later on, when we have to actually submit to CBSE or any other education board. What is stopping us from working with the child if he has or he's showing the signs, right?
So, I mean, it should become interwoven into the entire learning teaching processes. So
Correct,
it's not
100%.
not only the child with SLD who benefits, but others will also benefit there.
Absolutely. Look, that's
Okay.
the beauty of SLD, which I'm sure in your previous webinars you must have covered. The beauty of SLD strategies are such that the child with SLD will definitely improve, but your other good kids become
It's
even
better.
better.
Even
Right, because we are
so, it's
teaching
a
what? We're teaching spelling, we're teaching reading, teaching comprehension. So अच्छे वाले तो और भी अच्छे हो जाएंगे, और जो नहीं अच्छे वाले थे, they'll come up a little bit, right? So that's the beauty of, that's why it's so easy to have inclusion in the true sense of the word with SLD in the classroom, because the strategies work for all children.
so it's a win-win situation, making it
Totally.
even better. Wow, wow. Lalita, do you want to add something, or maybe I go on to the next question?
just one thing I would like to say.
Yes.
I fully agree with Geet when she says, let's start the work, because when the teacher identifies, oh, he's 3 years old, he's not writing on the line, don't put him into a full assessment. Start giving him the help, and you will see he will come out beautifully. There are many, many kids when they come at the age of 3 or 4 and their parents are worried. We'll say, okay, we'll give them the help. We'll teach them how to learn, and let's see if he's learning. And if he's not learning consistently, he's falling after 3 or 4 years, we'll put him through this whole process of assessment. We can, and that's a wonderful message to give to every parent, because not everybody has to go. When you hear the word test, you go for a cold and the doctor says go for a test, you get worried. Is it something big, something serious? So why upset people? Let us help people, and then we will do. Thank
And
you.
I presume the last testing which has to be done is at age 18, or the last certificate that you get, the final certificate?
Well, as per the
When-
PWD, it should be done at 8, then 14, then 18. What you do at 18 will last you lifelong.
So fine, and the others can be, if they're given the proper strategies, probably they'll fall out also. They wouldn't need it further. Wow. So, Geet, may I ask you another question? Is what is so anyway? That's been answered. What is the correct age to get an assessment done? And who is to do the assessment, and where does it do? And I mean, which Lalita has just touched on, that it gives you a lot of fear, scare, not only to the child but the entire family gets so very affected by it. So can you just give us a glimpse into what is all this assessment about? How is it done? Do they prick needles to me? What do they do?
Hmm. All right, so I'm going to take one question at a time, huh? And quick answer.
Okay.
So, what is the? I'm going to tell you what the law says, and I will also tell you what I think, which you can disregard if you want to. The law says the guidelines of the PWD Act say that the child has to be at least 8 years old or in class 3 for an assessment to happen. All right. My point is fine, but like Renu ma'am and Lalita has already mentioned, if
Call me Renu, please.
uh, they have mentioned that children in India go to school at 3 plus. तो अगर हमारे को 3 plus में ही नजर आ रहा है कि बच्चे में थोड़ी तकलीफ है, तो हम 8 साल तक क्यों वेट करें? Why should we wait till 8 years old when I can see the soft signs in the child at 3 or 4 or 5? Okay, give the child the benefit of doubt that he's a late bloomer. All right. So we give him 2 years of instruction, formal instruction in school, wait for him to catch up in case he does on his own. And in class 1, or when he's 6 years old, or 5.5, 6 years old, we do the screening. Screening is only to identify children at risk. We are not diagnosing, we are not
We're
labeling the
not
child.
labeling.
Correct. We are not labeling the child. So, though the government of India says that wait till class 8, wait till age 8,
It-
I don't want to wait. Why am I wasting 3 years or 2 years or even 1 year for the child? Yeah, these are critical times. If the gap can be lessened, why not? So this is up to the school, this is up to the system, this is up to the educators to take a call. But according to the government of India, it's age 8 or class 3. Next, what happens during an assessment? You don't have any needles being stuck in you at all. You will have somebody like me, like a psychologist, who will be talking to the child, who will be talking to the parents, who will take feedback from parents, child's guardians, maybe child's special educator, and the child's teachers. Look, we have to remember that it is not a Kanneka assessment. The assessment is a battery of tests. We are not just using one test. We have to make sure we have to check the child's cognitive ability to rule out any kind of intellectual deficits. Then we have to do a skill based test or an achievement test. All right. With this, if the child is showing any other soft signs, maybe ADHD, which is attention issues, that test needs to be done. So it is a test where the rapport is formed with the child, the psychologist works with the child. It could be a paper pencil test, it could be, like a puzzle test, or it could be a visual motor test. So there are different tests depending upon which tool is being used for what purpose, right? तो घबराने वाली कोई बात नहीं है. It takes time, but it takes about 2 or 3 sessions, depending upon how old the child is and how severe the need is. And the assessment itself is, it's a very well rounded kind of document. I would like to show it to you, though you're not going to be able to see it, but I'm showing you a assessment of my, this is my daughter's. I mean, agar aapko nazar mein aa raha hai, so if you see that it has a, I mean, it has a lot of pages and this, that, and all, because it explains, it tells you technically what is wrong, but it also gives you a layman picture, so the parent understands, so the teacher understand. I mean, it's all okay for me to use big words because I'm a psychologist, but what am I trying to prove there? क्योंकि पेरेंट को तो कुछ समझ नहीं आएगा ना ही टीचर को समझ में आएगा. सो वी हैव टू मेक श्योर दैट वी ब्रेक इट डाउन. देन दिस हैज टू बी with the annexures required by CBSE. This has to be with the disability certificate, which is a must. So one has to be, aware that these are the things which are required. All right, and it is all there on the CBSE site. So it's not a secret. We just have to know where to look. All right. So this is during the assessment. It is a possibility that the parent, especially the mother, is very anxious. The anxiety of the mother or the parent will seep into the child, even if she is not saying anything. Try to calm them down. It's not a big deal to have dyslexia or dysgraphia or dyscalculia. It's just a perspective we look at, and we don't make too much noise about what the child can't do, and we make hell of a noise about what the child can do. All right, children with SLD come with fantastic strengths, so they are fantastic artists, or graphic visuals, or sports persons. So they really have some fantastic talents which a lot of other kids don't have. So instead of making, like I said, making a noise about you can't do math, let's make noise about you can sing beautifully. So this is what we have to, it has to be a little change. जिसे कहते हैं ना, नजरिए में थोड़ा सा बदलाव लाने की जरूरत है हम लोगों को. And so the parent goes, the child goes on a happier note, not a stressful note. Because remember, assessment is the start. If they're starting with so much anxiety, it's just going to take longer for the child to get on track.
Wonderful.
Next, how much time take? Sorry, time मैंने आपको
sorry,
बता
yeah,
दिया है. 2 to 3 sessions, about 40-45 minutes each. It could be 4, depending upon, what is the problem with the child, what are the issues with the child, how severe the problem is. Who does the assessment? We already know it has to be a psychologist's assessment, formal assessment. All right. However, a screening can be done by a teacher if she knows how to do it, if she has the correct tool and she has the correct training in it. You can train general ed teachers to screen children. And like Renu ma'am said, it has to be woven into the system of the school. It has to be integrated, that it is, when the child, all children that reach class 1, they will be screened. So the kids who are showing, little soft problems will be picked up and automatically worked with. All right. So it has to be woven into the system. So, and where does one go for an assessment? You can go to a private practitioner like a clinical psychologist, or you can go to hospital setups, government hospital setups. But just remember, whoever you go to should have an RCI certification, should have an RCI number or registration. Otherwise, it might be difficult for you to get the assessment accepted by the education boards. Renu ma'am, is that okay?
Yeah, wonderful. So I can see, like for a doctor, you need to have a medical, what is it called? The
Registration.
Medical Association of India registration. So to be able to assess do the
Correct.
assessment and the diagnosis, you need to have a Rehabilitation Council of India certification with the number that they give you. And that gets, I think you have to keep working for it every 5 years, see that you are again
Yes.
being able to get that number back. It's not an easy process. I
It has
also found
it has a renewal. You have to get it
it,
renewed, and you have to upgrade your skills by getting points and stuff. So those
so
are for the
it's,
professionals. They know it.
Yeah, Renu, I have one point. In the south,
yes.
especially in Tamil Nadu, uh, they have specified which organization will do it. So they will, if there is a private person who has this
Hmm.
certification RCI, they may not take it. So it goes through a certain government body. So that government body will ask you, send me your reports. They will take it. They have their own way of certain assessments they do. They give the final concession certificate to the child. That's how it's been in Tamil Nadu.
Okay, so I suppose in India, in Delhi also,
Yeah, there are
uh,
disputes.
there is some certain thing that you can go to these particular people, but I think it's become more wider in Delhi over a period of time. So we are still grappling. I would also want to bring to the audience that it was in Chennai, it was in South, that the initial organizations working in the area of dyslexia emerged. Then others came in North India. We came in to understand that slightly later. So probably we are settling down more. We need more time to settle down here. And I find this is that testing is going to be enjoyable for the child. It's a lot of work for the psychologist, and the parents would also understand that. So good. It is good for me if I don't have to do the assessment, somebody else does it for me. Lalita, tell me, can the schools refuse admission to a child with disability? And can they fail a child with disability?
The first part of the question, I think every child has a right to education. So, because the child is come with the certificate, is already found out in one place, he got himself assessed, or the parents are finding that he's got some difficulty in learning academics, the child cannot be refused. I will tell you something that happened in my life. I was involved as a parent in a committee to help admission for 3-year-olds. There was this little boy, we were told, ask him, as parents, involved in the help, ask him to write 1 to 10 and A to Z. This fellow went on refusing. So I didn't know what to do. As a lay person, this was many years, 30 years, 35 years ago. I called the school head of the department and said, see, this fellow is so sweet. He's not writing. Can you make him write? She came to him and she called him, coaxed him. He said no. Then we both decided, we didn't have the heart to say no to him, took him to the principal. He pulls up a chair, sits in front of the principal, and says, good morning. So the principal wishes him and says, what? He says, why didn't you write, my boy? I don't know to read and write. That's why I came to school. I think that was the brilliant thing, and it touched. And the principal said, he has taught us a lesson. Let us help him. See, that bit of writing, because he's 3 years old, he's not holding the pencil and writing 1 to 10. What right have we say no to? So we have to help a child. I think I'm for all children going to school. And I think Geet will agree with that. They can come with different issues. We are here to help. We go to a hospital, we want help. And if the hospital throws that out, we say, that's not the right thing. We have come to serve the children. So I think no school should say no. To the second part of it, failing a child. Now, if the child is not given the needed help and he's not picked up his skill to read and write, but he's good in mugging and writing the answer with spelling errors and failing him, I think it is not a learning disability, it is a teaching disability. The
Absolutely.
teachers have not
Absolutely.
given him the way to learn what are his mistakes. So I think as adults, as people in the field, we should take the responsibility and give the child all the opportunity, tap his potential, and then help him, and then say, where is the difficulty? That is when the assessment is going to help us to identify him and not to label him. Only when we identify, we can be able to give them the appropriate help. I hope I have answered.
Wonderful, wonderfully. And I had the NEP 2020. So I was going through that as a good teacher. And I realized that it says very clearly that it is focusing on inclusive mainstream education. That means every child in the mainstream school. So nobody can be dropped out. Wow. Second is we had another webinar before, and where the question was, is reading and writing made by humans? So should it be compulsory? And Lalita ji has said very clearly here, our entire focus should not be on reading and writing. And I love the last part that she said, a hospital doesn't say that you have a problem, so please go away. Why? How come the education system says that? I'm going to, this is a very big takeaway for me. Uh, Geet, uh, what is this benchmark disability? I mean, I thought neurodevelopmental disability. So, how do they calculate this 40%? And I am.
Uh, So let me start by saying that nowhere in the world is SLD or specific learning disabilities or learning disabilities quantified. It is diagnosed on the basis of severity, which could be mild LD or SLD or moderate SLD or severe SLD or profound SLD. All right. However, in our country, because all disabilities, other disabilities, the 21 out of the 21 other 20 disabilities are quantifiable. हमारे पीडब्ल्यूडी एक्ट में लिखा है कि अगर बच्चे को या अगर इंडिविजुअल को 40% डिसेबिलिटी है, only then will you get the accommodations. So by default, SLD has fallen under the same quantification confusion. All right. So they had to they we had to fit it in. As of now, I'm sure in the coming years something will be done about this, but however, presently what happens is that if you use the tool for disability, for SLD, which is the Nimhan's battery, which is the recognized tool, if on Nimhan's battery you get moderate SLD, it is equivalent to 40%. So that is the formula which is being adopted currently by the professionals to give the quantification. Because if you don't have the quantification on your disability certificate, it is rejected.
And there are 21 disabilities. So,
Yes.
as of now, we have not been able to develop a formula for SLD.
There
Uh,
isn't a formula. I
there
mean, it's
isn't
not
a
that the
problem.
Indians haven't been able to develop.
Hmm.
Nowhere in the world do they quantify SLD, in terms of a percentage. They say you have it or you don't have it. It's a condition,
Absolutely.
you have it or you don't have it. You have a mild form, you have a moderate form, you have a severe form, like that. They don't say कि आपको 10% SLD है या
एग्जैक्टली।
20%.
तो ब्रेन के अंदर घुस के हम कुछ नहीं कर देख सकते ना. Wonderful. So this is so
हाँ.
important. I mean, thank you for clarifying this. And so it is with invisible. And one more, what was I coming to next was another question is that you did speak about Nimhans, which is an Indian test. I Are there more, I mean, tests which are for being developed, which are for the Indian population? Because
Okay,
many a
so
times I hear people say, "Oh, it's because it is a foreign test, therefore my child appears to have been labeled as dyslexic."
hmm.
So, could you elaborate on
Well,
this?
there is a grain of truth in that, Renuji, that
Hmm.
that there are most tools, standardized tools, are based on the Western population. However, in the recent years, there has been a lot of research and development in SLD in our country also. So there is Nimhan's battery, which is the accepted battery for SLD assessment or diagnosis. One is that though it is the biggest limitation is that it's not for full range of school going children. You cannot, in the senior secondary you can't use it. However, Nimhans is right now currently at this point working on the extension or expanding the Nimhans battery. So one is that. Then secondly, we have, if you are familiar with it, the SNDT University in Mumbai has diagnostic test which is called DTLD and DTRD, but those are quite old. Like Lalita said some time ago that you have to keep using updated tests. Because lots change. So those are tests, those are good tests. However, they're standardized tests, but they are quite antiquated. All right. Next is what is has come very recently is the DALI, which is Dyslexia Assessment of Languages of India, and it is developed by NBRC, National Brain Research Center. So now that's a very good test, as far as dyslexia is concerned, and right now it's also available in 4 languages. But it's only till class 5 as of now. So that also is being it's in the process of being expanded to cover the full range of school classes. So that is there, and it's for dyslexia. So they are also working on something for dyscalculia as we speak. Thirdly, there is a first screen, which is a screening app only. It is not diagnosis. It is not assessment as such, formal assessment. It's a screening tool and it's an app. So, from the point of view of accessibility, a parent can be sitting in Jammu Kashmir or, right at the bottom, Kanyakumari, and still have access to it just to start to see whether the child has an issue or not. So that's a screening app. It's a free app. It's right now available in 2 languages, and by the end of the year, it will be available in another 10 Indian languages. So these are some of the tools which are available in our country for SLD. Um, However, a lot more needs to be done. A lot more needs to be done in terms of assessment and diagnosis and all, because a lot of them still use foreign tests.
Lalita ji, would you like to add something?
Yes, she has covered everything. But the only thing is when we do the screening, especially if it is a teacher when we give it, we must
Can you
bring
bring your mic closer? Your mic is far away. Can you come closer to the mic?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. See, it's very important when we give a screening test to the teacher to tell them we want to know information about the child. We are not judging her performance, because sometimes teachers, when they're doing the screening, they're a little worried about, if I say the child is not doing well, the school say I didn't teach him. So we should equip the school and the teachers that we are looking at the child and not at her work. So that I think. Because a couple of times teachers, when you give them this, oh, will the school say I'm bad? No, it is not that. We are looking at the child. We should bring that awareness.
That's so important. And, we were having this discussion about the formative evaluation is not to assess the child or assess the teacher. It is to understand if the construction of that concept has taken place. So screening, this apprehension is so very, it shouldn't be there. It's wrongly placed. And what I also found when I was listening to you people, I wonder how many global tests which are standardized and validated have been translated into different languages. I think we are way ahead of other countries in that. We'll be able to reach out to many of our languages. So that is going to be so good for so many of our students and learners. Uh, I uh, I was also thinking while I was listening to you people, the researchers, there's so much of work for researchers now. There's so much to be done. It's a virgin field, I felt. Wish I was younger and I could do more research and we could develop better tests. And what you people tend to be saying is that the tests were there, but upgradation of that test across the years is what needs to be done. So, all the listeners here, all the young academicians and researchers, see where you can go and do something more for the child with SLD. I move on to my next question from here is Lalita ji,
Yes.
which school boards are able to support the child with SLD, and how do they do it? And the third part of it, uh, what are the other possibilities that need to be done?
As far as now, I can say over the periods when we started or when I was looking help for my child, there was no board significantly saying this is what qualifies you to get this help for your child. There was nothing there. But over the period we have evolved, and every state has its own little rules. But when you take the CBSE, which is prevalent all over the country, they have sort of formed a set of standardized rules which is applicable. And so all the CBSE schools do know that and have it. But the question becomes, are parents aware of it to go and get the help? We need to tell the parents that this is there for the child, because we should not take the easy way out. Because if the CBSE has given a scribe, it doesn't mean a child who is not got a certified label saying that he needs a scribe, but not for anybody to get good marks. That's not the question. So they should be aware. There are boards, every state has different ways of helping. Some have more, some have less. But the common thing, people, the schools should go and get it from the specific board they are doing. Like, for example, the state government in Tamil Nadu is now making up a policy what needs to be done, because their way of testing the summative exam is a little different from the CBSE. So, what requirements they will need will be different. So, we need to be aware of what is expected of the child for that particular board and give. But I think it is there, but it's a long process. Each one will say start the child at 7 years, get this test, get. So, how we can come to a uniform rule, like we have Indian rupee, which is used all over the country. Like that, if we have a standardized method of saying you can be in any board, but these are the rules. If we can come up with that, it will make very uh, nice information for the parent and for the child.
That's great. So it is apparently CBSE has been able to be ahead of others. The state boards still need to gear themselves up,
They
probably.
have they have their own rules, and it is different for states. It has something to say.
Yeah, Geet.
Okay, Renu, as far as what Lalita said was very true. CBSE is one of the most child-friendly boards, and it has it's almost covered all the skills, whether it's a reader, whether it's a writer, whether it's a prompter, whether it's a calculator, whether it's choice of subjects, whether it's a mixture of vocation and academic, subjects. So it's very beautifully put
Label.
it down. So the accommodations given by CBSE are marvelous. I that's what I feel. So one is this. So, and very truly, the education being a state prerogative, the state boards differ a little bit. Like for example, Maharashtra is way ahead of a lot of other state boards. They start formally giving accommodations in younger classes, and in Delhi we don't have that. So in Delhi, the schools will say unless if the child reaches class ninth, only then we are going to start giving accommodation. So there is a little bit of tussle there. So that's the so education boards, all education boards, whether it's CBSE, whether it's state board, whether it's ICSE, whether it's IB, whether it's Cambridge board, which is A levels and O level GCSE, All of them will give you accommodations with the right documentation. However, IB and GCSE call it access arrangements. They call it by a different name. In India, we call it accommodations, reasonable accommodations. There, they call it access arrangements. So when you're looking, for it, maybe you just need to know that the terminology or the nomenclature differs little bit, but all of them have uh, accommodations. All of them will give the support.
This is very interesting also. Specific learning disability came under the 2021 disabilities only in 2016. But majority of the boards were doing something in spite of there being no laws, acts, policies for it. And
Correct.
so that is, I think we have a good education system probably, and with its limitations, of course, with a lot of limitations probably. Have parents faced issues? Of course, the child faces issues. Have parents have to go, and where do they go for redressals? Have anyone gone to court? Why are people scared? Parents scared of asking for their rights?
झूठ बोलूं कि सच बोलूं?
दोनों बोलो,
All
पर
right.
सच से स्टार्ट करो.
So basically, look, like Lalita ji already said, that it's right to
एग्जाम्पल्स भी
education.
चाहिए.
So it's right to education. No school can deny admission on the basis of ability. If there is a vacancy, no school can ask a parent to take their child out on the basis of that we are not equipped to deal with your child. All this is, all this is all stories, all right, or their excuses. If a parent is aware enough, they can actually go and fight for the child's right because it's a law. So the parent needs to be aware. Now the thing is that there are times where parents are aware and they will go and fight it out. And what they do, or what I would say, the trick I tell the parents is, sorry, I'm putting it on national forum. I said, ask the schools to give it in writing. They will never give it in writing because it's against the law. All right. So that is the thing. If the school wants their child to go out, give it to me in writing. They will never do it because that becomes evidence, right? But there are parents who don't know about it. That's all right. That's lack of awareness on the parts of parents for whatever reason. All right. I would say it's lack of awareness on part of regular education system, regular public decimation of information. But there are also parents who are scared to do it despite knowing. And why are they scared? Because they think that it's a possibility that the school officials might harass the child, might harass the sibling in the school, might harass the parents, if the school does anything. So that's a reality, whether we like to believe it or not. That's a reality. And if they take the child out of school, then they are stuck because school admissions are not an easy feat, especially in the big countries, the cities. In Delhi, it's, I mean, you can become the prime minister before you get admission in schools. It's basically like that, so it's very, very difficult. So here it's a catch 20 for parents. कहाँ जाए, आगे कुआं पीछे खाई वाली बात आ जाती है, so that is the thing. But if the school is doing these things like not taking the child in or asking the child to leave school, trust me, the parents can take the school to court. You can quote me on this, but
Yes.
please fight for the child. The parent is the biggest advocate of the child. You and I
In
cannot do this as special educators or psychologists. It's the parents who has to, you know, at the end of the day. I can only guide or instigate people.
And I do remember, even at the university levels, there were court cases, and it's easier for parents to do it at the university, which is more open, than a school system, which is far more structured. And it did bring about changes. It did
Yes.
bring about changes.
In
So
the
I
recent
know it is
years,
a high, and it's a difficult situation. Lalita ji, would you like to add something? I'm going
I
to
think
add a
she,
new question. Yeah,
yeah,
please.
she has covered it very nicely, very explicitly for parents. So I think there's nothing more to say for that.
Luckily, we have time. So I'm going to ask you an extra question here.
Yeah.
Is there are these SLD, if I call them the SLD sensitive schools, what are the type of skills they try to develop in in the teachers, the administrators, the non-faculty teaching staff? What do they do? How do they make their school SLD sensitive?
One of the things that people do is they say we have a resource room. But having one resource teacher for 2,000 children is not an answer. So the, the school needs the help because in every classroom, if you see, there will be at least one or two or three children who come under the pure category of specific learning difficulty. And they only have to watch out and give them the help. It's very easy to say we have a resource room, but is the resource room teacher able to handle the number of children? And another thing that I find is they say we have some support for the children. Take the child out during music hour or games hour. I mean, that is where these children excel. If you take that out of their life and put them into a reading session, I mean, put ourselves into that. So I feel schools are getting help. I think very few are giving 100% pledged help. One is they have their own rules and regulations, and it's difficult. They want the 100% marks for all the children, which our children may not be able to give. They will get 60, 70%, but not be able to get that center with everything in it. So today is the word for only them or for our children also. Keith, would you like to say something?
Uh, I would just say what you're saying very correctly, and also that the numbers.
Yes.
One special educator cannot handle more than 6 to 8 kids max. Push it to 10. You know, more than that, no. But the reality is that in Delhi, I'm not taking. I'm not talking for the whole country. I'm talking about what is happening in the Delhi school. Most, or let me put it this way, a considerable number of schools are just employing one special educator for over 1,000 kids because it is mandated by
And
CBSE. So in the checklist, they will say we have special educator, we have a resource room. But how much of it is the efficacy of the resource room is anybody's guess. So this
very
is another thing that for actual, I would say, ideal support, you have to have an interdisciplinary team because a child with SLD may also need OT. A child of, they may also might, OT is occupational therapist. They also might need language therapists, right? So it has to be a multidisciplinary team. They have to have the equipment. It has to have the resource in terms of books and, the OT equipment, the SLT equipment, so everything. It's. I mean, if you have to do it, it has to be done in a proper way. Just keeping one special educator's, she'll run away or he'll run away because they can't handle more than 8, 10 kids. So that's
So that
to the two sides. One is what should be and what is actually being done.
happening.
Yes, so that means is exactly there is a lot to be done, and we need to be very clear, understand what is a resource room, how do we connect everyone, develop those multidisciplinary team where the child is also part of it. The last question: are there any helplines which the parent or the child or the education system can access?
Uh, there is no there is no national helpline. There are, in different pockets of the country, there are different organizations. They could be non-profit organizations, they could be private organizations. So in different states there are different organizations. Some have been there for very long. For example, Lalita's organization, Alpha 2 Mega, is one of the pioneers in the south,
Yeah.
in Tamil Nadu, right?
And
So we have MDA also, we have Maharashtra Dyslexia Association also, then we have Orchids in Delhi. So there are these five, six organizations which have been there for some time, and they have their own, awareness programs going and so on. But we don't have
Yes.
one helpline pan India. So, but if parents need to find out, there are WhatsApp groups, there are newsletters which go out, to help. And I think a lot of organizations have these short online courses or, talk shows, interactive talk shows, and so on nowadays, especially, in the pandemic. So the access has become quite easy, but nothing as a national, SLD helpline nahi hai.
because the number of organizations, there are micro, what do we say, skills developed organizations which are trying to do more than, because there's so few of them. They're amazing, all these that you've spoken about, but I suppose we need much more in the field across the country. And so that's one thing. The last question which is coming in from the audience is regarding pandemic. Did it create any type of issues? We are running out of time, but still the question is there, so I'm putting it across. uh,
Look, let me take it first, then I'll ask Lalita to add. The pandemic, strangely, when we started, it was in March 2020 when the schools shut down in Delhi, and we were all horrified. I mean, I'm, starting with special educators. I mean, we, for the life of us, couldn't understand how are we going to manage where we can't manage with the child sitting face to face because of so many issues. How the hell are we going to manage on screen? So what? But seeing the overall picture and the slow transition from offline to online, and now seeing going back to offline, I have kind of seen that most SLD kids, when given the intervention, kind of maintained or sustained their skill level. There were a few there were a few who just couldn't hack online at all, and they went down. And there were also a very small percentage, Renu ma'am, you'll be surprised to know, and it's delightful that they responded much better
Yes.
online and they blossomed. I mean, they almost jumped 2 or 3 years within 18 months, and they worked better on an online system. So it takes all kinds, but if the parent took upon themselves to continue their online intervention. So most kids have sustained. So there hasn't been too much of up and down. But
Wonderful, but yeah.
what if the parents stopped? Then
Then
the
there is
child has nosedived.
So
very
you
true.
need everyone, the entire. It takes a village to develop, to rear a child,
Raise
right?
the child,
Okay.
yes.
So I think Lalita, last question because we are really last sentence. Yeah, we're running
I
out of time.
The same thing we found. If the parents supported us coming to the online, the progress was maintained. And there are children who plateaued, but there are children who bloomed, and people who stopped have dropped. And now they come and say, "Oh, 2 years, my child has dropped." The ball is in your court. You did. We can offer it. If you don't take it, we can't. I completely agree with
Absolutely.
you. Thank you.
So it's the entire village. Wonderful. It was so amazing having both of you here, and such a learning for us. As all of us assimilate the pertinent points and suggestions stated by the experts, may I request Rita Menon to give the way forward. Rita Menon, the vice president of IWAFA, is an IS officer of the 1975 batch, and she has an extensive career in UP and the government of India. She has worked in the fields of infrastructure creation, industrial promotion and development, defense and defense production, health and finance. She retired as a secretary textiles and went on to become CMD, Indian Trade Promotion Organization. She has contributed not ably to the development, notably to the development of industrial townships in UP, industrial corridor, financing of industrial town planning, modernization of defense shipyards, upgradation and modernization of textile sector, handbook sector, and programs for craftsmen. She has been instrumental in drawing up the blueprint for a state of the art convention and exhibition complex at Pragati Maidan, among other center implemented projects. She participates on professional boards of companies and several not for profit organizations. MS Rita Menon, over to you. You are muted.
All
You
right.
are muted.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Malviya. Uh, to my mind, Dr. Ramanujam and Dr. Oberoi of Tamil Nadu and Delhi, respectively, have perhaps shed the brightest light, in my opinion, when you look into the uh, deliberations of the last few webinars. Namely, they've talked about the assessment tools for diagnostic analysis for special learning disability, virtually an invisible condition to me as a layperson, embedded in average children. How the disability manifests, the complete subject of neurodisability levels, and the ascertainment has been really a great learning hour for me, because with their very deep experience in their respective institutes, Alpha to Omega and Orchids, they carry with them a world of experience and research in training programs, educational therapy, wearing of many, many hats, respectively, in the international and national arena, recognized by specialists and institutions in India and abroad, and the kind of work being done in their association with institutes actually overwhelms me, and it has been a great learning process. Dr. Malviya made it a very interactive session. She put forth a lot of questions which perhaps researchers, academicians, teachers, and most importantly, parents would ask of these two very specialist ladies who have uh, been kind enough to grace our webinar today. And I think one of the very important uh, deliberation has been on the question of screening, diagnostics, intervention, and how to go forward on these lines. I think these steps have been most important, and we learned that SLD's management requires screening, identification of the weakness. One size does not fit all, one shoe does not fit all, and it is a very personal thing. People conducting these tests are very specific. It perhaps is not left to the teacher alone. Psychologist, neurologist, as well as a person who has talents in occupational therapy. And most important for India, which I learn now, is on the issue of languages. These tools are very, very important. We also learned that Dr. Ramanujam said that there is an importance to screen the child by age 8. With different languages, does it create a problem? I think it does, as Dr. Geet Oberoi answered. And the tests and assessments should be incorporated in the entire system of learning. And it would be better, since children in India go to school much earlier than the age of 8, that a child should be helped from the age of 3 or 4. They should be taught how to learn, and the discerning eye of the teacher who is trained in detecting special disabilities would be able to catch them very young, which is actually a great message. We also learned that the certificates and assessments for this disability are conducted at the ages of 8, 14, and 18 years, which will then equip them for lifelong relevance. As the law says, according to Dr. Oberoi, the law says at least 8-year-olds, but she feels, and I think we would all agree with her, that in a competitive environment, as India really stands to hold now for everybody, the test could be at 3 plus, not wait till the age of 8, and to screen them, take early action. Sometimes it's a blessing, and the child can actually catch up and pick up all the sounds, nuances, and attitudes along with abilities to read, write, and count. So the right steps are very important. And the question of being a multilingual country is really the key. And both our eminent researchers have told us that a mother tongue at home and perhaps another language, generally English, as everybody aspires for English, does create problems of translation and in a complex thinking problem where the environmental factors are so important, especially for government schools. So the guidance is very important, and the empathetic approach of the teacher is also very, very important. What happens during assessment? It seems to be something very frightening, where a child is perhaps subject to a lot of neurological tests, and some things are kind of put on his head as if it's an ECG. But both our specialists made it clearer for us that this assessment is really a talking to of the child by the guardian, by the teacher, and not using one test, basically a test to ascertain cognitive ability, and an achievement test, and not in a ham-handed manner, but over some lengths of time. And these, both the ladies have said that at least 2 to 3 sessions of about 40 to 45 minutes each would be a well-rounded experience of assessing the teacher. And the documents have to have a lot of specificity. They should be simple and intelligible to the parents. I was also delighted to learn that the CBSC, which we actually as parents think is rather a big demon, has a lot of empathy towards children with these difficulties. And I'm happy that the anxiety of parents and mothers, which actually comes through in the child's manner and the diagnostic tests, uh, have been sort of assured by the CBSC to some manner. And apart from that, many of the state level boards, Tamil Nadu being a forerunner and a leader, and other boards like Maharashtra also have a very broad minded approach to access special needs. The very important lesson is, of course, that it should be ingrained into the system, and that an RCI certificate or number is required for the special learning disability to be accepted in the formal system, and then for it to be uh, sort of credited for the special needs of children. Also, upgrading skills are very important for a professional. There is learning every day. And what I am most impressed about as a person who is listening to the deliberations is that despite the right to education and despite the cognizance of special learning disability, as recently as 2016, much water has flown under the bridge. Many organizations have been working on it quietly, and institutes are doing human service in bridging the gaps which perhaps India would have had being a starter only in 2016, and the fact that there is now a complete understanding though it's a dynamic one, of what we are doing with the children. Are we failing the child? Are we having teachers who are exhibiting a teaching disability? I think this has all been benchmarked, and mild SLD, moderate SLD, severe SLD is a fairly good way of understanding where we stand and the tests which do indicate these three categories. Of course, there is the 40-45% hump, which is the qualification mark for many other disabilities, into which basket SLDs also come in. But realizing that a moderate SLD constitutes 40% as per the Act, especially in the way the Nimhan's battery format is an assessor, gives us a lot of hope in this regard because it is truly an Indian test. Nimhan's test has been developed for the Indian people. It's the most standard tool, though it is based on Western populations to some extent. In recent years, the Indianization, like perhaps the sort of toys that are exhibited or photo or placed in a visual manner, are more Indian than not, is a very heartening feeling that there is a sort of an annual reassessment, upgradation, and Indianization, both by the Nimhans and the SNDT University in Bombay, especially the DALI, which is a test available in 4 languages. And Dr. Oberoi tells us that perhaps by the end of 2022, it will be available in 10 Indian languages. This really does equip the researcher, the teacher, and the parent with a lot of confidence that that the children who would be having this disability have a lot of hope. With the parents, there is probably uh, the the happy news that many boards are child friendly, but there is, of course, the question of parents being aware, especially in the format of government schools or government aided schools, where I think there is a responsibility of the system to be able to tell them and equip them with the knowledge that there are these tools available and that their child too should not be frightened of being not so much ahead of others in the learning process, but there are many areas to redress them. The question of getting good documentation to equip you for further action is also a very heartening one. That no school can deny admission according to the Right to Education Act is another heartening one. But there are always slips between the legal process, the legislation, and what is practically done. And it is really incumbent on the parents to fight for their children's right, because as our two speakers say, correctly, the parents are the biggest advocate for the child, and the teacher can go to a certain extent and not more than that. There are SLD sensitive schools which are there, but the bad news is that by keeping a special learning or special needs educator for a full school is hardly going to help the numbers of children who might be having the disability. This gap is actually helped a lot by the organizations and the not-for-profit organization that have helplines sometimes. They can be approached for awareness, and the children, parents of children can really reach out to them, as there seems to be no pan-Indian helpline that exists at present. At least for the present, it's not been developed. A very important question that IWAFA has always been grappling with over the entire pandemic, whether it was the needs of elderly people or whether it was the prospects of employment. In this particular case, how has the pandemic treated children with special learning disability? because many committed teachers, when the pandemic happened and the schools were closed, absolutely closed in a closed sense from March 20, had to devise ways and means to transit from offline to online. I'm also aware as a grandparent that teachers had to do a lot of work to even help normal children get through their syllabus. But what has enthused IWAFA today is the understanding that there were many children who maintained the skill level thanks to the empathetic attitude of the teachers and the hard work they did. And the ones who went downhill were really a very small percentage. I could attribute it partly to the fact that a face to face interaction can sometimes be very intimidating, especially in a school formal format. But the fact that there is an online access, which is vastly helped by the parent, is has been a boon, and it has been used very effectively by our teachers in India, and we are very grateful to them for this act of nation building, which has ensured that a large number of children have bloomed. And it's only some parents who have stated that their children have dropped. All in all, there were a lot of very interesting questions answered, a lot of information and diagnostic tools explained, therapies explained, and I must say that this has been one of the most satisfying sessions that IWAFA could have on the subject of special learning disabilities. Thank you, Professor Malvia, for outlining a number of questions which our audience uh, could uh, could sort of be relate to. And thank you, ladies. You'll be having a separate vote of thanks. But from my end, a great thank you for giving me a whole lot of information. And thank you from IWAFA for giving us this large spread of knowledge that we could use in our further programs. Thank you very much.
Uh, Thank you so much, Rita Menon. May I request Dr. Mona Suri to give the vote of thanks? Dr. Mona Suri is the executive committee member of IWAFA. She has been the vice president of Royal University for Women, Bahrain, and she was an associate professor at Delhi University, Lady Irwin College, and I could go on and on about the different things that she does. She's very dynamic, publishes at international level, and she's a global researcher, teacher, and whatnot. So may I pass on the mic to Dr. Mona Suri for the vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, Professor Renu. I appreciate your introduction. On behalf of the All India Women's Education Fund Association, IWAFA, I would like to give a formal vote of thanks to all those people who have made this national webinar series a reality. Specifically to the panelists, like for your time, for the fact that you have shared, your rich experience with all of us, and you have also shared the good practices in the area of dyslexia with all of us. Dr. Lalita Ramanujan, thank you so much for providing us the insights into the SLD conditions and the terminology which you have talked about in terms of inherent and environment factors, summative, formative assessment, identify and label a student, a child with SLD. So these were the fine things that I think all of us need to be sensitive to. So thank you very much, and thank you for highlighting the role of counselors and teachers in supporting these kind of students. Dr. Geet Oberoi, thank you for giving us the holistic approach to assessment and how it impacts everybody in the class, including the children with special needs, the students who are at risk, and even the normal children, and this whole synergy that is between the students in a classroom and how we can actually achieve that. Thank you for giving us the role of the center and the state boards in terms of their readiness and in terms of their inclination to support the SLD. And I think most importantly, for your honest and frank opinions about what is the reality and what is the ideal situation that should be. So we really appreciate that. Professor Renu Malviya, what do I say? Thank you for being the person who initiated this entire webinar series and then being an excellent moderator in today's session. Thank you for effectively managing the session, raising pertinent questions and comments, and also keeping time. I mean, we have overshot a little bit, but I think when we are dealing with such important topics, this is something which is but natural. Thank you, Ms. Asha Chandra, the President of IVFA, for your unconditional support and guidance in organizing this series. Your overall vision of IVFA has made it possible for us to work as a team to achieve greater heights. And thank you for your welcome address for today's session. Thank you, Ms. Rita Menon, the Chairman of Governing Body Lady Irwin College and Vice President of IVFA, for beautifully summarizing today's proceedings and giving us the salient points for the way forward. I think when we are going to create a document on this entire web series, the webinars, I think the summations that you have given are going to be very important because they actually give a bird's eye view of what happened in that particular session. Further, I would like to thank all the executive committee members of IVFA for their advisory role, and specifically to Ms. Asha Ahuja for providing us the much needed administrative support in organizing these series. Thanks are due to Lady Irwin College for their unconditional support and assistance for all IVFA activities. Special thanks to Department of Education, who are the knowledge partners for this national series, and also to the student interns from the Department of Education and Lady Irwin College in general for their efficient and ready assistance in managing the modalities of this particular webinar. I would also like to thank Voice for Ability, our social media partners, for efficiently organizing this series of webinars in the last 1 month. Uh, Thanks are also due to Ms. Shubhlata Jain, who has graciously sponsored this event. Special thanks to Dr. Manisha Chaudhary for connecting us to the sponsors, and to Mr. Arman Ali for his guidance in doing that. Last but not the least, the audience, a big thank you to all of you for being there with us from the beginning till the end. And your active participation is evident through the comments that we see in our comment section and the very important questions that you have raised during the last 1.5 hours. So thank you all for making today's webinar, in my view, a big success. And we look forward to our next webinar on 30th of April, and which is the last one in the series to come. So thank you, one and all. It was really an enjoyable experience. Shukran.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Mona Suri. And please, the next webinar, we meet you on 30th April 2020 at 11:30. Reflection, Voices for Families, Schools, and the SLD. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, one. Thank you all.
Thank you, Lady. Thank you.